Okay, so now that we've gone over the basics of hard surface sculpting, we're going to come into a little bit of concepting. In the interest of time, we're not going to cover everything, but this will give you a good idea of how to go about it. Basically, all of these meshes were started from very simple unified skins, basically just oblong spheres that were kind of pushed and pulled into what you see now. You can kind of see like in the gun area and the hands right here. That's how all the meshes started. They're very, very basic. Absolutely nothing in them at all. And in this concepting phase, there are two things I'm trying to focus on, or two very important things. There's other things obviously, but the first thing is joints. I want to make sure that this character isn't like a lot of the hard surface characters you see a lot around where they wouldn't deform, or they wouldn't be able to deform. It seems like unlikely that they would be able to move their joints in a way that would be necessary for them to function. I've seen a lot of sculpts where it have really cool surface details, but essentially it's just a mechanical statue. So I want to focus a lot on joints, and the other thing I'm trying to focus on a lot is form or silhouette. So you can see me working on the feet right now, and I had to think there are kind of like a few ways that the feet needed to form. You see I kind of left an area for the ankle, or not the ankle, but the back area of the foot, so when he extends his foot outwards, these areas can kind of fold into each other and hide themselves. And on the front of the foot, there's a few important places where it needs to deform. The toes are a really important place. So there needs to be a cut where the toes would be. And this kind of top area that you see in the front, that would be really important to deform. So basically I've created an extraction because I wanted to create this as a separate mesh. It was getting a bit hard to modify, so I went ahead and just extracted this area on the back of the foot. And I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out and inflate it a bit. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide the other side since I didn't have symmetry on. I'm going to delete hidden. And I'm going to go ahead and use the subtool master to mirror it. Alright, so now I have a mirrored mesh. And I can work on this independently of the feet. And since I don't need that part anymore, I can go ahead and push this in to make way for it, my new mesh. And use the move tool to kind of move it into place and move it into the overall shape that I want. Alright, so at points you see me using the move elastic tool, and this brush is essentially an extreme version of the move brush, but what it does is it tries to stretch polygons as little as possible. So it's useful in some circumstances. It's really something you have to feel out though. I mostly use the move tool except for when I need to make overall kind of mesh changes. You can see me working on the top of the foot right now. This is the part of the foot that I need to be able to deform. It needs to be able to fold into kind of the bottom areas of the foot. So I've gone ahead and extracted it like I did the back of the foot. And I'm going to go ahead and inflate it a bit and smooth it out so I can work with it better. You can see just like everything else started, it's a very messy mesh right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just start moving it into place here. And I need to cut out a little bit more here so when he actually does start running and his feet start to move around, a lot of these areas have places to fold into. Alright, and so basically what I've done here is I've taken a cylinder primitive, which you can find in your tools menu, and just appended a cylinder. and have scaled it down and moved it into place. And this is just going to be a placeholder for the kind of mechanical detail I want down there. I'm just using the Damien standard brush to kind of cut around it and define where that's going to be dominant. You'll notice I use the Damien standard brush a lot to kind of cut into areas, and it's a really good brush to make decisions on where you want to separate mechanical areas, where you want to separate different plates, where you want to separate different entire objects. You can see I'm making a cut right here, and eventually those are going to be two different meshes. So it's very helpful to do that. And right here I've just turned off smooth while I subdivide, just so it doesn't get too rounded and too blobby. Trying to show those as distinct parts. So again, I'm using the Damien standard brush right here. And essentially what I'm doing is just separating out the areas of the top leg, like I did with the foot. Still trying to find overall silhouette and still trying to figure out how each of these pieces are going to deform, which is why you see that huge cut in the side of the leg. Because when he moves his leg out, if that area you see on the side of his leg wasn't able to kind of bend out, it would collide with his torso, and we don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and just make a cut there so it can deform. I'm just trying to cut in overall shapes to see where I want different objects to be. And it's good not to focus on one part of the mesh too long. It's good to keep jumping around like I'm doing. Because if you tend to focus on one part of the mesh too long and then move to a different mesh and start working on that, it'll start to look like separate things. It'll start to look like they weren't designed by the same person, or perhaps at the same time. You can tell that they were. They won't be able to tell exactly what it is, but they'll be able to say this doesn't quite fit. So it's good to just keep jumping around the mesh and keep while you have your ideas of what you're doing on a certain part fresh, to apply those to the entire mesh. So I'm coming into the forearms and cutting in the areas where I want to separate out objects. Trying to keep this theme of very a certain type of angle. And kind of adding that cut in there, because that's where a few deformations would take place. When he raises his arm, we need that to bend a little bit. So now I'm trying to add a little bit of the tubing, or at least a hint at the start of the tubing. What I'm using is I'm using Z-Sketch, so I use a Z-sphere and then popped over to Z-Sketch. And I'm just drawing a few sketch spheres along the torso, the lower torso. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to convert these into a unified skin, copy them around the torso. So I've kind of made them equal sized. And I'm going to use the push and pull brush to kind of push that in to make it look like it's more integrated with the suit itself, the suit of armor itself. Let me go ahead and go into unified skin and click preview. And it's too low resolution, so I want to up the subdivisions. Or sorry, excuse me, up the resolution. And then we'll go ahead and make unified skin. Alright, so I deleted those Z-Sketch spheres because I don't really need them anymore. This is more of a placeholder in any case. And actually most of this mesh is placeholder. It's just kind of to get an idea of how things are going to turn out eventually. Alright, so I mirrored that over with the Subtool Master. And now I've copied it, I've made a duplicate, and I want to rotate this so it fits the front of the torso. So I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it and then move it into place. There we go. And just use the move brush to kind of move it around a little bit, get it more situated, just a tad bit better. Alright, so now I'm going to work a little bit on the forearm. And since it's going to be the gun attached to the forearm, what you see me using is the trim hole brush. And the trim hole brush has a kind of a peculiar way of functioning. It works with respect to the camera angle. So no matter whichever way your camera's face is the way it'll cut into the mesh, and which it will make flat against the camera angle. So it's really good to like kind of angle things a little bit and get a nice little hole carved into it. It's the same way you can make like screw ports and stuff like that in the way that they exist in real life. So I'm working on the hands a little bit. Again, this is really rough. You can kind of see the fingers there. They're very, very basic spheres. And I'm just trying to get the overall shape. I'm not going to worry too much about detail right now. I'm gonna cut the areas out that I want to be separate objects, but other than that, I'm gonna take almost no interest in it. I'm not gonna focus on it, I guess I should say. And so I'm breaking this up basically into two parts, the palm and the back of the hand. So I'm gonna start working on the fingers a little bit. Cutting in the joints again, just a little bit, going around and subdividing all these too, so I need more resolution to actually cut in these joints. So go ahead and cut in kind of the design I want there, and cut in areas so the finger can bend on the inside as well. And I gotta just keep moving things around too, so they integrate as best they can with each other. And kind of making the knuckle area. So I'm going to kind of just pull these polygons around. I want to keep it pretty low resolution, because the more resolution you get, the more messy it can possibly get. So I kind of want to just have the overall general idea of what's going on and not get too worried about the details, which you can. If you start subdividing it too many times, you can get caught up in creating little details and it'll slow you down quite a bit. So it's good to just keep it as basic as possible, especially in this concepting stage. Alright, so kind of have all the areas mapped in for this finger at least. And you notice I kind of, these fingers are really like clubbed or chubby. And I was kind of going for a more like spacesuit, like when astronauts first went to the moon, they kind of have these really, really chubby gloves, almost like snow gloves, where they seem like they'd kind of be really hard to operate in, but they give that kind of overall bulkier look, which I want this guy to be. I want him to be more of a tanking character than a kind of small, fast character. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out the knuckles I previously cut in. And to give the illusion of a hole here, I'm just going to go ahead and mask off everything that I want to affect. and invert the mask so I can actually affect it. And then just kind of push this in a little bit. All right, so you notice I'm spending quite a bit of time on this individual finger. I'm not going around to all the other fingers, and the reason for that is I'm not going to actually bother making the other fingers. What I'm going to do is when I finish this finger, I'm just going to dupe it to all four, or to the other three. I'm going to have to still create the thumb because it's just different than the others, so that still needs to be created. But as far as this goes, creating one finger and then adjusting the size of them will be more than sufficient. All right, so I'm just going to come over in here and do the thumb as well, using the Damien standard brush to pull these areas out and kind of define all the areas. Just cut it over here. And I'm going to push the palm in a little bit so we can actually have some mechanical areas. And you can see, like, I'm in a sense, I know how the thumb is going to deform and where it's going to move, so I need to cut in this area so I can allow it to actually move around. So I'm going to go ahead and move this thumb joint around, the knuckle area, and then pull out the topmost knuckle for the thumb. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate each of these subtools. And I'm going to go ahead and only work on one side for now and mirror them over later. It'll make it a lot easier for the whole process. So I'm going to rotate it around, and using transpose, I'm going to kind of get it into position. And for my hand, I really want like a kind of a relaxed gesture for the hand. So I'm not going to create like a T pose, fingers directly straight out. It's going to just be more of like the position your hand is in if you're not thinking about it, and if they're just down at your side. So I'm going to go ahead and scale all these and move them around. And kind of use transpose to rotate all of these. So I can go ahead and mask this area off, and then rotate up the joint. Kind of move it into position a bit. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, so now I kind of want to rotate the other fingers just a little bit just to match the placing. And then pull out the rest of the knuckles. Use the Damien standard brush to define where those will be and cut those in. All right, I kind of want to add a little like area that can fold for his thumb as well. So I'll just cut that in and move that out. So I'm going to kind of make this more of a circular shape so I can pull out the gun. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and actually mask a circular area off right here. And then invert the mask and use the transpose tool to just pull that straight down and kind of pull it out a little bit. Since the gun is going to be integrated into his the bottom of his forearm, so we want to make it a bit more apparent that it's there. All right, so I'm adding a few surface details just to kind of see what kind of the smaller pieces I want for the mesh for the character. And you can see I'm leaving this fairly low resolution. I don't want to go into it too much again. Just trying to define all the areas. I'm using the Damien standard brush a lot here just to make everything sharp as possible. You can see how easy it is to just pull areas out with the brush itself. Alright, so I'll go ahead and cut this area in. Just like that. And use the layer brush to just push that in, just add a hint of detail. Not necessarily the detail that's going to be there, but just a hint that there will be detail there eventually. So now I'm trying to define where each of these plates is going to end and where the arm is going to begin. So I need to go ahead and cut all around all of these and determine how thick the plates are going to be and when the forearm's going to start and actually how they connect to the forearm. These are pretty important details if you want to create the illusion of kind of a complex mechanical object. You add the under stuff because it gives you little hints that there's actually something under there. Alright, and so this is kind of the little plating above the hand, and it needs to be a separate object because when he rotates his wrist backwards towards the back of his forearm, it needs to be able to deform, otherwise he won't be able to move his arm at all, or his hand at all. So that's important to separate out. This part I'm working on too is also going to be a separate object. Alright, so just adding a few surface details, trying to figure out exactly how I want to detail the character. Again, all of this is subject to change. Just kind of sharpening out areas. And so now I want to use the H polish brush to kind of sharpen that up a bit. I'll go ahead and cut it into this here, just to signify that this is going to be a separate plate from what's closer to the actual forearm. And then use the pinch brush to pinch it all in. And create the hole for the gun, so it's not just a cylindrical thing popping out of his arm. Alright, so all these little details, I'm just using the clay tubes brush to add little details. It's a good idea to go in and throw in a few details just to see what the character will eventually look like, maybe. To give you a hint of what it may look like. Alright, so I'm working on the upper leg here, the thigh. And you can see I'm gonna make a little cut right here of where I want the areas to be able to fold in, or outwards, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and defining how thick the plating is. And just kind of cleaning everything up a little bit. And so what I'm doing right here is just overextending the stroke a little bit, but I'm defining where the plating is going to separate. And so this top area over here is going to be a separate object, and it's going to be able to rotate outwards away from the torso. So when he moves his legs, when he stretches his legs outwards away from his center of mass, it won't fold into the torso, and it won't obstruct his movement at all. All right, so just pushing this in a little bit. I used the clay tubes to go ahead and push that in, and now I'm using the pinch brush to make that area a little bit smaller. And for the tubing, I'm just going to add just a few hints of that it's connected together with a little bit of roping or something like that, just to give it some kind of continuity. And working on the elbow area, trying to find the right shapes for it. And I'm thinking about adding a little tube right here, so I'll go ahead and just use this standard brush here. Add a few little tubes. Again, this is not how we'll be making the final tubing details, but for a hint, it's perfectly okay to work this way. We could have used Z-spheres too for this, but I found that just using a few brush strokes was quite a bit faster. So go ahead and pull this out just a little bit. And what I'm trying to do here is trying to make the elbow feel as if it's integrated to the forearm armor. And I think the tubing helps that quite a bit. All right, so now I'm working on his crotch area, and just trying to find the correct kind of cuts. And when you think about this kind of stuff, you think, so there's a person in this, and you're sure they probably have to go to the bathroom every once in a while. So I'm kind of making a little cutout in case maybe if like there's some kind of reserve for where the deposits go. If it overflows, maybe you can just open that and get rid of it. So a little thought of design going into that. All right, so now I'm using the layer brush to just kind of cut this area in and suggest that there is maybe some kind of hinge there that will connect the middle of the forearm to the very bottom above the hand. Perhaps some kind of hinge that allows him to move his arm, or that keeps the plating above the hand connected to the forearm, the rest of the forearm. All right, so you see me, I'm kind of, while I have this idea fresh, I'm going around to most of the places with this brush to add a few details. Keeping the same theme of using the layer brush to push it in, and then the hard polish brush to bring it back out. All right, so again, I use my semicolon trick to hide all of the other subtools except for this one, which gets really helpful when you start to deal with large numbers of subtools, which we will be eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out a little bit, just to kind of give it a little bit of a surface detail. And polish that out a bit. And use the Damien Standard brush to cut into it. Alright, so I think I'm pretty much done with concepting. I'm going to go ahead and check around the mesh a little bit to make sure that everything works together. And I think it does, so we can go ahead and move on to the creation of the actual mesh.